Hello Booktube, this is Aaron from Aaron Read a Book or Aaron Read a Book. To gear up for the season of top 10 rankings, I'm going to do my top 10 rankings from last year because I didn't have a Booktube channel then. But I had sort of convinced myself that I needed to start writing Goodreads reviews because I often wouldn't remember anything about books I'd read, so I think it's a good way to try and remember things. And this is Remember December after all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my top 10 and I'm going to read you my Goodreads review of what I wrote. Because my memory is terrible and it's hard to remember things. And some of these, I look at the reviews and I still think I don't remember that in great detail. But it's more, I've got fond memories of all these books. They're just more feelings than concrete memories. Anyway, 8 of these books I gave 5 stars. It wasn't a very good reading year for me last year. Only 8 5 stars, and the last 2 were high 4 stars that I've got very fond memories of, and I might retroactively upgrade them. They're already upgraded in my brain. So let's start with, this was an author that I actually gave 2 5-star reviews to, so but I'm only picking one book, and that is Barbara Pym's Crampton Hodnet, and this is my Goodreads review of Crampton Hodnet. Another excellent Pym. This one has a funny name and it becomes even more funny in context. Now I don't know what that means. So but there is something on the back about it. This is a wonderfully accomplished farce, beginning with the joke of using her own name in the title, Barbara Mary Crampton Pym. I don't know why that is even more funny in context. I think there's something in the book about it as well. But it's a wickedly comedic farce focusing in recognisably Pym fashion on the unsuitable romantic entanglements of a curate and a pretty young girl, both of whom live in the same rooming house. Yeah, I mean, all Barbara Pyms are kind of mould into one for me. They're normally about sort of quite old people in villages who live on the village green and go to their local Church of England church. They're all really funny. I give them all 5 stars basically because I just love her writing. So Barbara Pym, one of my favourites. Yeah, I think I can reread them over and over again because I do forget their plots. They're a bit like Agatha Christie. I just know I like them. The second book I gave 5 stars to is science fiction, The Pastel City, by M. John Harrison. This is a strange one for me because it was a real life recommendation and I don't often get those or take them. It was a friend of mine. I was round his house and he had quite a lot of sci-fi books, not too many, but he said his favourite author was M. John Harrison. So I thought I'd give one a go, and I did really love it. And also since then I've watched the Outlaw Booksellers channel quite a lot, and he obviously loves M. John Harrison. He's interviewed him on his channel and things. Let's read the review I wrote. This is a beautifully written little fantasy. It has the elements of a classic fantasy, a fellowship, a journey, but mixed with sci-fi elements as it's set in a post-apocalypse where dead machines litter the earth and can be harnessed for war. The melancholy prose is the real star. Can't wait to read the rest of the series. So this is the first in the Viraconium series. This is a terrible cover, by the way. I find all the fantasy masterwork covers horrible, considering how good the fantasy sci-fi masterwork ones are. The sci-fi masterworks ones are, sorry. I much prefer this old classic one. Yeah, I do remember really enjoying this one, sort of Don Quixote type figure almost. But I have not read on I have not read on it. It took me a while to get the Masterworks version with the other books in it. But I'll happily reread this one because they're only little, and crack on with that series eventually. So that's our first bit of sci-fi. And now we're going to go to someone who tries to do a bit of sci-fi and had always disappointed me in the past, and that is Ishiguro and his book Remains of the Day. So I got this because I think I saw Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading it, and she really enjoyed it, or she really recommended it or something. And I thought I'd give him another go because I read Never Let Me Go and I didn't really like it, and I don't like people who dabble in sci-fi. Just do proper sci-fi. Don't drop little bits in. But and I think, like, I hate it when people do sci-fi and then they're like, oh, I'm not a sci-fi author, I'm a mainstream author. But anyway, I loved this book. I thought it was a masterpiece, and it was definitely on the higher end of this list. By the way, I've not put these in any order. They're just the first 8 of the ones that I go 5 stars to. My Goodreads review of this is just, oh, Mr. Stevens with your silly dignity, and then I've added a Simpsons meme that I will now put on screen now. Yeah, so I think most people have heard of this plot of this one because there's a famous film with Sir Anthony Hopkins and Emma Thompson as well. I can't remember if I watched the film after. I don't think I did. Maybe I did. I can't remember. I mean, this is last year. This is terrible memory. So this is about a butler and a housekeeper who write to each other over a long period of time and sort of have this unrealised love affair. And Mr. Stevens, with his silly dignity, is always getting in the way of them getting together. But brilliant book, and it really changed my mind on Ishiguro, so I do want to read more of him now. Talking of Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading, the next book was also another recommendation from her, and that was Now in November by Josephine Johnson. And this is another little short one. It's really beautifully written, and this is my Goodreads review of it. A beautifully written and relentlessly sad novel, set and written during the Great Depression. Johnson won the Pulitzer Prize for this at the age of 24, which is amazing, but explains why she wrote about young girls so well. It's very short, but still packs a punch of large works written later, like The Grapes of Wrath. I would love a backlisted podcast about this, as it seems to be very little known these days. Thanks, Books I'm Not Reading, for the recommendation. See, I was shouting out Kelly even before I had a channel. So yeah, I do remember this hitting really hard. Great Depression novel, and to write this when you're 24 years old is incredible. A high recommend. Yeah, I just remember it's sort of, I think, quite based on her real life a little bit, because it's about a middle class family that gets driven into the Depression. And yeah, the little girls are really well written there. Right, editing Aaron here. I forgot 2 books because I didn't have the physical copies in front of me, and my brain is tiny. So I've sandwiched this little bit in here somewhere. The next book was a 5-star read. Was the, I don't know how to say this word, the Inimitable Jeeves. I think that was good. I think that was it, by P.G. Wodehouse. I'd read many Jeeves and Wooster books before this one, but this is the first full-length one, and it's, well, I'm not going to spoil my review. Here's my review. I didn't think there was anything funnier than a P.G. Wodehouse novel. Turns out there is a P.G. Wodehouse short story. This is the first full-length book of our friends Jeeves and Wooster, and it's made up of are related short stories rather than one long one, most of them involving Bertie's lovesick school chum, Bingo. They were all amazing, but my favourite is when they go to the countryside and start betting on the length of the local vicar's sermons. It had me in stitches. I'd forgotten about that. That is really funny. They get a betting ring going. Yeah, I think P.G. Wodehouse is the funniest person to ever write a book. And I also think he would have quite a wide appeal. Like, I know a lot of my friends would like him if they tried him. We all have that sense of humour. And I think this is a great one to start with, actually, as well, because it's only short little stories. And you can always get it for like 99p on Kindle. So definitely do that. Go get it. The other one that I don't have a physical copy of would probably be in my top 10 sci-fi books of all time. It was one of the best things I've read in a long time. And it's Mockingbird by Walter Tevis. I wrote a super long review of this, so for me anyway, I normally only manage a few lines, as you can tell, but I'll read the review because I think I go into quite a lot of detail. I am surprised that this 1980 dystopian novel by the author of The Queen's Gambit is not more widely read, especially since it is essentially about the joy and power of reading. Walter Tevis seems to have a knack for getting screen adaptations out of his books. The Hustler, The Man Who Fell to Earth, The Colour of Money, and most recently, of course, The Queen's Gambit. But not Mockingbird. It has fallen into cult status. It is set in the distant future. Humans have become completely stupid, solitary beings who just take drugs and watch TV. The rise of automation, robots do our jobs, alongside a society strongly focused on the individual and privacy, have basically destroyed family and community. People are basically stupid drones who don't understand that they are lonely and often gather in groups and self-immolate. Tevis himself was an alcoholic who went 17 years without writing a book as he struggled with addiction, and he was already dying of cancer when he wrote this, so death is frequently explored in the themes. It's hard not to see some prescience here. It echoes the opioid crisis and the screen addiction of 21st century. We follow mostly two characters: Spofforth, the smartest and most advanced android ever created, the last of his type, a suicidal robot who basically single-handedly keeps New York running, but retains some of the desires of the human whose brain that they use to program him, and therefore yearns for a life he cannot have. And Bentley, a man who has taught himself to read using an educational film, the first man who can read in hundreds of years, and goes to New York to work for Spofforth. We also meet Mary Lou, a girl who does not take the mind-numbing drugs everyone else takes, and therefore attracts the eye of Bentley, who teaches her to read too. This is a novel about how reading teaches us about our past, about how other people feel. That is our inactions with each other. Well, I've made a spelling mistake there. Is how our interactions with each other make us humans, make us a society. For me, it's up there with some of the more widely known great dystopian books. Yeah, so I have very fond memories of this novel, and it is really deep and funny and sad and dark. And it is weird that it was written in 1980, and I think Walter Tevis would be absolutely appalled by us walking around looking at little screens in our hands. So yes, very highly recommended, and I never see it spoken about on Booktube, so if you like sci-fi, definitely give Mockingbird a try. Right, next book is the first non-fiction on the list, and that is my good old friend Herodotus. Yeah, it took me a long time to get to this, considering I have a history degree and a history A level. Herodotus is the father of history, the first real history book, and you might think that the oldest history book on earth would be dry, but it is not dry. It's great fun. Let's read my review anyway. Herodotus is good company, a curious man who travelled widely and asked lots of questions 2,500 years ago. He wrote down what he knew and history was born. Fascinating. Yeah, so that sort of sums it up nicely. It's just really nice fun, like travelling around with Herodotus and learning things. And you can, his character really comes through in this as a sort of quite odd, a bit of an oddball. And I just love the first half of the book especially. Everyone always bangs on about sort of the 300 and the Spartans and that, but I love the first half where he's just bumming around Egypt for loads of chapters and stuff, and seeing weird gold digging ants in the desert. I love Herodotus, and he's not intimidating. I saw people saying, I think it was Aaron Facer said on his video that was one of the non-fiction books that slightly intimidated him, but not intimidating at all. He's brilliant fun on the page. Next book, another sort of, I guess this is fantasy, and it's actually just the first book in this series, Zelazny's The Chronicles of Amber. I've been thinking about this quite a lot this week because I read Legends and Lattes, and that had little elements of the real world sprinkled into it. Like, it's about a cafe in the fantasy world, and there's like lattes and chocolate and coffee machines and things. And it just didn't work for me. I don't like it when that happens. I think it takes you out of the fantasy world. But I was thinking that's almost never worked for me, apart from in this book, which where the real world is real, but it's a reflection of Amber, and there's multiple visions of Amber that people can go in and out of. What's the other book I've seen this in? Is it Garth Nix? Sabriel. He does a similar thing, where the real world is being sort of invaded by a fantasy world. But I think this is the best I've ever seen it done. This is my review of it anyway. This was a wonderful fantasy adventure. A man wakes in hospital after a car accident and slowly starts to remember that he is a prince in another world, the true world of Amber, which our world is only a shadow of. Can he defeat the other members of his scheming family and rise to the throne? So much is packed into this first novel. I can't wait to crack on with the rest of the series. I always say that. I did read the second one in this, and I didn't like it quite as much, but it was still good. It's actually short, although this is a chunky version. The first book's actually quite short, so I do think Zelazny is a very interesting writer. He writes very quite unique fantasy and sci-fi. Lord of Light, I think, is another one he did that was really interesting, about sort of the Hindu gods ruling over Earth and stuff. So he does like to have the real world in there. But he's just absolutely hammered out the books. He's got hundreds, and they're always quite interesting. Some of them terrible, some of them great, and I think this is a great one. Right, we're now on to what I gave 8 stars to, but thinking back, they're 5 stars for me. So we're up to The Tenant of Wildfell by Anne Bronte. Obviously a lot of people have read this one, and I think I need to do a reread of all the main Bronte, well, at least Wuthering Heights, because this year I've read Jane Eyre for the second time, and I read this the year before, but I haven't read Wuthering Heights for many years, and I kind of think this, I don't really know what order to put them in. I like them all kind of equally in my head now, so it's quite hard. But this is my review of the Tenant of Wildfell Hall on Goodreads. Anne is the funnier and less gloomy than her sisters. This was refreshingly progressive for its age too, an early feminist book. And then again, I've used a meme here. I've posted a webcomic from one of my favourite webcomics, Hark a Vagrant, Kate Beaton. She used to do a history and literature webcomic before she started doing graphic novels. And she did this funny one called Dude Watching with the Brontes. I'll put it on screen now. Yeah, so I do think that's true, and seem to have better taste in men than her sisters. But yeah, this is really, I just love the atmosphere in Bronte novels. All three of the sisters can do it. This is like the mysterious new woman living in Wildfell Hall, and what's her past, and you see it from different perspectives, and it jumps back and forth narrative from one person to another. It's really, really well done, and there's letters and everything. It's all the great old Victorian stuff. And the last book is another non-fiction, and this one I have really fond memories of as well, and that is a Border by Kapka Kassabova. This I think about a lot actually, because, well, I'll read my review and then you'll see why. But I think this was originally a one that I saw Jen from Insert Literary Pun review, and I had it on my TBR for ages before I actually read it. And also I had a friend who's Bulgarian, so that interests me. This is my review anyway, it's quite a long one. This book is about Bulgaria's border with Greece and Turkey. Kassabova is a poet, so this is not an ordinary travelogue. She delves into the culture and the history of the border and what borders mean to the people who live there. It's a border that has been on the edge of the Balkan Wars, the edge of the Soviet Union, and now the edge of the EU. So people have been through many forced migrations, forced name changes, and forced religion, etc. Kassabova most shines in the present though. She gets wonderful stories from people and meets many interesting characters. The most heartbreaking are the Syrians, who are now wait on the edge of the Turkish border. Their kindness to her, despite their situation, is the most poignant part of this book. I always think about this book because immigration is constantly in the news in the UK. And I just wish more people had read books like this, because you get the human side of conflict and people crossing borders to escape things. Like she's with people in these camps and things, and they're just so nice to her. They're like cooking her dinner even they have nothing. Very interesting book. She does get really involved in the history of the area. And it's such a strange area as well, because people will like grow up in one country and then the border will move and they'll no longer be part of that country or they'll be forcefully migrated. There's so much forced migration around this area. But yeah, brilliantly and beautifully written as well. Right, so that was my top 10 of 2022, so that's good practice for 2023. I'm hoping my memory's better for 2023, so I don't have to read all the good reviews, Goodreads reviews, but there you go. What were your top of 2022, people? That's what I want to know in the comments. If you've got a channel, you probably made a video, so... But tell me anyway, what do you remember being your favourite book from 2022? Have a good one, BookTube.